Hello, today we're going to talk about comparative advantage and trade. The main objectives we are going to focus on today are how trade leads to gains for an individual and for national economies. Then we're going to look at the difference between absolute and comparative advantage. And then finally, we're going to look at how this can interact with the global marketplace. So first off, when we're talking about gains from trade, this is going to be kind of building off we've been looking at in previous units. It's going to be looking at choices of producers. It's going to look at resource allocation as we discussed with the PPC. And so some questions you might want to think about when you're thinking of trade in general. If you look down at your shoes right now, if you have any shoes on or shoes around you in your house or in the classroom or whatever, who made those shoes are going to be directly related to trade. Obviously, a lot of our clothing and that kind of stuff is outsourced and it is from different countries, and trade needs to happen in order for that to occur. When you eat food, maybe it's some locally sourced farmer, maybe it has seen trade or some sort of allocation from across the country or out of the country. Who grew the food you ate? Maybe it was a local farmer, maybe it was someone in a different country. These are all different things that are going to directly relate back to that trade aspect. So that comes to specialization. I always like to look at going to the dentist as an example of specialization. And what I mean by this is when you walk in, you go to the secretary takes your information, maybe your insurance card, then the dental hygienist brings you back, looks at your teeth, then the dentist kind of looks at scans, that kind of stuff to make sure everything is okay. Now, the dentist technically could do all of those different things, but it would really cut down on the amount of time that they were able to see other patients. So by specializing and delegating out some of those other resources to do other jobs, and by resources I mean workers, we're able to see more patients throughout the day than if the dentist just did every single one of those jobs by themselves. So some terms that you have to know as you move into this unit are going to be absolute advantage. You're going to see this abbreviated as AA often, and this is looking at someone who's just better at making that individual product. Comparative outputs mean looking at opportunity costs of producing. We're going to use the term other over in a moment. That is going to make sense, but just hang tight. Comparative inputs, other goes over once again, and these are looking at the resources you need to make. And terms of trade often is going to be abbreviated as TOT, is going to look at what point does a trade make sense between two entities. So some tips, when we're looking at units for comparative and absolute advantage, think the term other over. Like I said, that is going to make sense momentarily. For labor hours, it's going to be the reverse because the least amount of time it takes is going to be better. So that is going to be reverse of units. And then comparative advantage means that the terms of trade needs to make sense for both parties before those different trades can be made. So now we're going to go through an example of what this looks like. So if we have two states, Oregon and Washington, we are going to look at absolute advantage. And when you look at these two, you are going to see that Oregon is just better at making timber than Washington because they can make 40 timber and Washington can only make 10. And Washington is just better at making apples because they can make 40, Oregon can only make 10. So they have absolute advantage here. Now we are going to look at our comparative advantage, which takes that opportunity cost in consideration. Other over is going to be what we are using here since we are looking at individual products. So what I mean by other over is if we're looking at the opportunity cost of one timber for Oregon, you're looking at 40 divided by 10, which is 0.25 apples. For opportunity cost of the other, we're going to see obviously 40 over 10, which is 4 timber, and then you do the same for Washington. If we look at it in graphical form, it will look something like this, and whoever has the lower opportunity cost should be the one making the product in terms of comparative advantage. And then, of course, this is going to be something we just need to practice, and it'd be the opposite for labor hours, which you'll see in a following video.